Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for Star Wars The High Republic Marvel comic, Volume 3, Jedi's End. This contains the High Republic series issues 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, which wrap up this comic for Phase 1. This comic will continue, I believe, under the same name of just the High Republic Marvel comic, but I think it will be starting again from issue 1, because we're going back in time for Phase 2. So, this, is the end for now, and that issues haven't been coming out for the last couple of months. 15 is the last one. But it also contains Star Wars The High Republic Eye of the Storm, issue 1 and 2. That's a 2-issue miniseries about the origin of Marchion Ro, and I suppose going in depth a little bit on his species, which has been kind of clouded in mystery up to now. So overall, I thought it was a pretty good ending to the comic. There's definitely some eventful things that happened, in that it was clear they wanted to bring some character arcs to an end, along with catching the comic up with the events of The Fallen Star. That's the third novel, which obviously is where we see the destruction of Starlight Beacon. So we do get some of that from the comic perspective right at the end. I will say it feels like it's more of a, they had to do this, they had to eventually tie it in, rather than the focus of the comic becomes tying in with what's happening with Starlight. It just feels like the plot of this naturally transitions into that. Its plot comes to an end and then it catches up with that. So I think it's actually pretty nicely done without it feeling like that event just takes over everything. It is still at its core about Keeve, Skier, and Avar as the main characters. Lorna comes in, of course, as you can see here on the cover, as a bit of a focus as well. And then, of course, the mini-series, the focus there is obviously on Marchion as the main character. So, in terms of what actually kind of goes on here, we get, there's obviously a lot of death kind of fake out type things. The two Bond twins, they are revealed, they look like they're going to be taken out by the leveler, but they end up surviving because they both go into this sort of kind of force hibernation type thing, but they are deeply affected by this, and that's what goes on there. It's revealed that, Skier, because he's having his connection with the Force has been kind of interrupted. We go into a little bit more depth on that. They explain that he has this kind of Trandoshan kind of disease that affects his brain, that is kind of forcing him to give into his kind of primal instincts and be more driven by rage. And so to counteract that, his connection to the Force is the thing that's sort of being sacrificed. So this is why we're seeing this this explains, I suppose, the characterization of Skier for a lot of the book, which has been him barely holding himself back, and then these bursts of rage coming out as his focus goes from containing this disease to obviously at certain times not containing it. Keeve is more kind of going along with the ride of the story and just experiencing all of this, and she's placed in this interesting position where she's kind of being sympathetic towards what's happening with Skier, while also kind of seeing that in a way the potentially going down the dark path that's kind of happening to her master is kind of also happening to Avar. And so she can't really do anything to save Skier, but she can help Avar not fall to the dark side. And Skier even basically asks her to help Avar to, kind of move past this. And so in that sense, that kind of character, the triangle of those characters, and you do get some of the other Jedi involved, mainly Maru as kind of this kind of icon of, in a way, what the Jedi are meant to be. But for the most part, like I said, it's those three. I think Keeve is we'll get to her being super interesting later on. I think the comic did an okay job at she's our main character here. She's very capable, but I definitely want more with her. And I think when we come back to her probably in phase 3, I think the interesting dynamic of her not knowing the fate of Skier and then whatever is going on with Avar will place her in quite an interesting position, with again the idea that we basically know that she is destined in the future to become one of the lost Jedi. So what goes on to make that happen? Because it seems like her actions throughout this book are very like she is the kind of ideal Jedi almost in all of this. Avar, I think, remains very interesting because she's one of the big 3 characters for phase 1. And it's kind of unfortunate that she was kind of taken out of the books after Light of the Jedi and kind of placed in the comic, and this is where you kind of have to go to get her story. Because I feel that her arc would have been better done if it was done in a novel. It's fine, it's solid as it's done here, but it didn't connect as much as I think they wanted to connect. Again, one of our big 3 characters kind of falling to the dark side, and you can sort of see how it's happening. She is placed kind of out there as the sort of like battlefield commander, organizing things on the front lines, more or less. She wants to fight back the Drengir. Now she wants to be the one to directly fight back the Nihil. She's being forced to make more and more sort of harsh decisions, take action a lot more than she maybe usually does. And she has like scenes in this book where she scolds Skier for his rage, his anger taking over, and him resorting to violence more than is necessary, and that she even asked for his lightsaber. She asked for him to give up his lightsaber to her. The only thing that I think gets in the way of this arc is that it feels a little rushed, even though it feels like they have the page count to do it well. There almost is like too much of a need to focus on all these other things and all these other characters, when if it was just laser focused on a character arc, I think it could have been done very, very well. I think it's just a lot of the scenes where like you do see her make a move that is a little bit more leaning towards darkness. The scenes where Keeve does step in, there's just a sense throughout the whole thing that you are aware the whole time that she's not going to fall. That Keeve will bring her back, and that's the whole point here. That's what the arc, that's what they're going for here. And I don't think they execute on the dialogue of how they make that happen well enough that it's anything more than just, this is fine, it makes sense as the arc, but it is not so emotionally well written that I don't immediately just think like, yep, you did that arc by the numbers, and that's how it went. Like I said, it's still good. Like I'm overall leaning towards like, for like say the High Republic 11 to 15 stuff, probably like a 7.5. Like it's still good, but it never to me quite hits any particular scene as being absolutely standout, absolutely amazing. Lorna in here as the main sort of thread, in that obviously at this stage of the story they believe Lorna is the eye of the Nihil, and it's not until Ro gives his speech basically revealing himself that everyone becomes aware that they were after the wrong person. So this is why I suppose we see Avar's anger directed very clearly at Lorna, and why Keeve has to step in to stop her from killing her. And in that sense, like I think they do the sort of mirroring scenes relatively well of, oh, here's Skier carving through some Nihil and Avar scolding him for that. And then we get Avar walking through a battlefield effectively being like, take them out. And Keeve being like, I don't think this is the right way to do it. Obviously, there's the little bit of the kind of weird nuance of like, they are being attacked, so self-defense, and like they don't go enough into the nuance of it, but you see from, I suppose, the way she's drawn, Avar's drawn, and how harsh in a way her language is about this, that yeah, she's going overboard with it, and so Kiev is the one to kind of bring her back. And there are little moments where like they come to blows. They sort of have to clash lightsabers a little bit over this, because that's like how intense kind of things are. But again, it's all very quick. Would be my thing, is that we do go from, you know, the page of like they clash over their ideals here, and you know, whose song are you hearing right now? Is it the Force or is it your own? You're not thinking straight. And before you can allow that to go somewhere, that like Kiev actually has the right idea, Kiev gets caught up in an explosion. She's out of action, and so you think Avar is gonna fall to the dark side even more. And they just kind of have another action scene play out. But then Kiev wakes up again just to stop her from killing Lorna, and it's just, you kind of did the same thing twice, when it would have been a little bit more interesting to just do that once, but do it really, really well. As it is, there's just a sense that the arc is maybe a little bit too simple. It's just Avar be good, and that there's no more nuance than that. Now, this is where I'm hopeful for when they bring Avar into Phase 3, when we come back to it, that this, what happened here, and the fact that she came close to falling, will put her on a nice trajectory going forward. And especially because we have sort of Elzar in a kind of sort of similar situation, but almost like, you almost feel like coming out of this that maybe Elzar is maybe in a bit of a better situation, because he knows he has to, in a way, redeem himself and keep himself on the right track because of what happened to Stellan. Whereas Avar does feel a little lost here, that she needed Kiev there to kind of save her, kind of almost like from herself. And that could create a bit of a interesting arc for the character, because she's almost been presented as the best of them, because like she was kind of one of the main characters in Light of the Jedi. So seeing her, you know, argue with Stellan throughout a lot of this stuff, and you know, we see the scene where she's kind of removed as steward of the Starlight Beacon, right as the explosion happens. So you do get that moment. How many issues are we through here? So yeah, it is basically just the last couple of pages of issue 14, leaving issue 15 to cover catching up with Fallen Star. So what's interesting though is that what happens to Lorna is that Avar does cut Lorna's hand off, and they do capture her. But in the middle of all this chaos, and them realizing that the beacon's going down, Lorna does manage to escape. So she does escape again. She's still out there, which I think is fine. It made sense. She's an interesting character. You've already done the sort of prison stuff with her through Tempest Runner, so you didn't need to do that again. And you can resolve whatever you want to do with her in Phase 3 as well. So, getting into, I suppose, the kind of conclusion stuff here, Skier is left in a mysterious position where, obviously, on Starlight Beacon, the Leveler is there and is affecting Jedi. And the big kind of cliffhanger for issue 14 going to 15 we get is that suddenly everyone begins to be affected by the Leveler. Avar, Kiev, all the other Jedi. But not Skier, because of his condition, and because to keep his condition under wraps, he's basically kind of sacrificing his connection to the Force. So it's not impacting him as much. So he can actually act in all of this and help the others get away. And we just get this situation where he seemingly confronts the Leveler. We don't come back to it. We just get this moment where he basically tells Kiev to run, go, I will do this. This is like, you know, he says, it's not the end. We will see each other again. This is the way it was always meant to be. The Force is with me now and forever. So I believe that is the last time we see Skier. So he just stays there to fend off the Leveler. And effectively, because Starlight crashes, there's the idea of like, he either dies fighting the Leveler or goes down with the ship. So it feels like a sort of Buryaga type situation, but almost like more extreme with Skier, where just looking at his arc and what's happened to him with the loss of his hand, the arc they went through in the first kind of 2 volumes with the Drengir and that connection there, and that hurt him. Now the reveal of the condition that he has, and now this crazy situation that he's been put in. It feels like this would be somewhat okay as the end of the character, saving the comic characters by sacrificing himself. That I think is actually a pretty kind of good way to go with it. If he were to come back, I also, I think, would be relatively okay with it, just to have some last moment. But they do, I think, lean towards that does seem to be the end. We get some interesting scenes like Lorna seemingly gets revenge against Orbelin by quote-unquote killing him. Just the nature of his species, I don't think that is the death of the character. I'm assuming he'll be back as well. Probably one of the best executed parts of the book is how they do the death of Maru as like the kind of technician in a way of the station, and like him using the Force to keep it together. Very, very strong. And again, he ends up saving everyone here. There's a moment where he's struggling. Avar, after the help she gets from Kyiv, connects to, you know, the Song of the Forest, links everyone together, and just keeps the station together for just like a little bit longer. This is also, this connection is what wakes up the Bond twins from their what happened to them with the Leveler. So they end up kind of waking up suddenly and saving Kyiv, but we do get the sacrifice of Maru to save Avar on the station. So again, this is one of those things where I think we knew from Fallen Star that Avar got out, but not necessarily what happened. And similarly with Maru, I think he was on the other half of the station, so we didn't really know the full situation, and it's helping to explain a few things. Now, obviously, there are still mysteries with regards to certain characters who are on the Starlight that we don't know what happened to them, but I think it's really obvious that they're going to survive. There's no way they killed off like Vernestra in the middle of this when she's so plot relevant going forward with everything. So we're going to come back there. But yeah, we just end with this moment of like Avar kind of feeling like she's failed, kind of personal failure, and then, you know, I suppose more professional failure here as well, with her as one of the main leaders of the Jedi being very affected by the fact that they've lost the beacon, that the Nihil kind of won this round. So interesting. Kyiv, I suppose, showed her strength throughout all of this, that she's only recently just been knighted, but she sort of showed herself to very much be a Jedi. So that's the main thing I get from kind of Kyiv, is just that like she really kind of represents what's you know, strong about the Jedi. So why is potentially she the one who later becomes a lost Jedi? So I don't know, maybe this is where we're going to get into some of the ideas of some of the things with being a Jedi too strict that cause these things to happen to other Jedi, and she leaves before something like that happens to herself. I'm not really sure. But we'll move from there into Eye of the Storm, issue 1 and 2, which are the full thing. Now, interestingly, the Eye of the Storm ends with the tagline here. Let me just get it here. End of phase 1. And it very much feels like that. I really liked Eye of the Storm. Art was a little questionable, but I think that would be my general thoughts on the art throughout most of the High Republic comic. Not like amazing. Certain like panels, like big images, nice, but overall not great. But it definitely captures the impact of like, there's actually some reveals in this that I was kind of surprised we didn't get in, say, one of the novels or anything like that. Whereas I feel ultimately like that the mainline High Republic comic, you don't have to read it This, though, does feel like it kind of is a must-read going into the next phase. Now, I'm assuming some of this stuff will get covered again in a novel when we finally get to more heavily plot incorporating a lot of this information into things. But I just thought it was a really nice little montage. It's done through like sort of scenes. Like it's 2 issues, but each issue is sort of split up into what seemingly feels like sort of 4 kind of almost like not connected scenes of like, here's sort of Marcia Monroe in the present day. Here's a flashback scene. Here's a scene with Marcia Monroe's father taking over the Nihil. Here's a scene of Marchion taking over the Nihil. That sort of thing. So really nice just montage through the sort of history, at least initial history of the Nihil. Really good stuff. So the main thing here is that we open up with a very cool backstory on Ro's species, which has been presented as nothing but a mystery up until now about what exactly they are. Obviously, we eventually got the reveal of what Ro kind of does actually look like, and he's got the sort of like kind of dark blue navy skin. So he's not like a chiss, it is different. And the backstory scene goes over the idea of, in their language, they were the Evereni, Eveoreni. It meant something like stewards or caretakers. And there's some pretty cool thematic stuff that goes on here. But the net result of this is that their planet, Everon, is a planet of storms. They call it a tempest world. So immediately you can sort of see the idea of this species. It sort of forms the origin of the Nihil. And they have all this storm imagery. And it effectively comes from this place here. You can see the storm systems. They kind of built their cities in the sky almost. And they have all this technology. But they talk about how they basically acted as caretakers for their world. And they were really nice to their planet. And they hoped that that would, the planet in turn would take care of them. But it was a mistake. A planet does not care, a storm does not care, and a once-in-a-millennium vortex basically takes out a huge amount of the Evereni. And so it's this kind of thing of like, these things kind of keep happening to them as a people, and they learn lessons from each of them. And it's this unfortunate situation where the lessons that they learn is to sort of be, in a way, harsher and crueler because the world is harsh and cruel to them. So simply just like their planet, you know, attacking them almost, that causes them to kind of adjust. Then it says like they put their faith into institutions, but they could not trust their leaders. And so then there was too many people. So they got rid of some of the people. They could not trust their people. War happened. And we just get this idea that it gets worse and worse and worse. They learn to not really trust anyone and effectively get to the point where they only trust themselves, including getting across the idea that they don't even trust their families anymore and are willing to, you know, attack them. So effectively this backstory is kind of covering why Marchion is the way he is, but it's also what feels like a way to kind of, I think reasonably well, explain how you can almost have an entire species of people, race of people, have a kind of personality trait that is all of them. This often gets criticized in like sci-fi fantasy, that you introduce a new race of characters and you have to have something intrinsic that makes them unique and different, but it doesn't make much sense that every member of this species is like that. So one of the more recent Star Wars books kind of dealt with this a little bit, with the whole idea of like, the Neimoidians aren't all the Trade Federation, yet that's how a lot of people in like the Core and the Republic would characterize it. But it's not actually the case. Yes, Neimoidians are essential to the Trade Federation, but there are people from like Cato Neimoidia who are not like that. This is kind of presenting this idea how this people, the Evereni, go from being like kind of dominant on their planet to suddenly everything that happens to them lowers their population. And they go down to being a relatively small group, and the small group of people who are left all don't trust anyone or anything. And so as we continue the backstory, we get into the idea of them leaving the planet Everon and discovering the galaxy and realizing that they also can't trust the people they found out in the galaxy. And so they learned to those who survived learned to hide their intentions, to live, to deceive, to turn others to their purpose. They became very good at it. They had evolved to become something very different than they were when they began. But at their heart, there remained an essential truth. They were still caretakers. But after all, they had survived. They were certain of just one thing. There's only one appropriate place to put your trust. There's only one person with whom your interests truly align. Before anything or anyone else, you must take care of yourself. So the race of people known as the caretakers learn to only be the caretakers of themselves. And it's I like the way it's told as this sort of legend of this people who sort of almost like fell from grace through sort of initially just almost just fate, like things just happening and just bad events after bad events happening, but the people always making the choice to, and now we don't trust this thing anymore, and we'll learn from that and adapt and do something different. But now we don't trust this thing anymore, to the point where they don't trust anything except themselves. And that goes as far as family connections. And so that's what's so interesting about when we go into like the next scene. And you can see that it's a young Marchion Ro. We have Asgar Ro here is Ro's father. And then Asgar Ro's mother here is also interesting. So this is 20 years before the Great Disaster. We have Mari Santeca there as well. And what we get here is effectively how Asgar took over control of the Nihil from his mother, which was that they sort of argued that like, oh, his mother's presenting the idea that Marchion is going to be like the tip of the knife that we've been sharpening for all these years as the Evereni. Just the fact that he, at such a young age, has focused in on the center of power of the Nihil, which is Mari Santeca, shows that he's going to be the best of us. So Asgar's kind of like, I think now is the time to actually like activate the plan that we've been setting up all this time. Let us actually ride the storm and let the Nihil be what we were meant to be. And that I think he even mentions that, like, was it like to his own mother, he's saying your mother wanted this to happen much quicker, but she obviously disagrees with that. And she's basically just really dismissive of him, of like, you're not good enough. And so you just get the idea that he just eliminates her. I guess he just pushes her off the balcony. She falls to her death. That's how he gains control. And again, it fits with the backstory that like they don't really trust each other. And so the second he realizes that like, oh, our interests don't really align anymore, boom, we're gone. So that's an interesting sort of cutaway. And we just get the idea of it's him taking over the Nihil at this point. But the other Nihil who are still left, and so you get the idea that you have like Pan and so on, they were loyal to Asgar's mother. So they want Asgard to prove himself. And so he does that by actually challenging them to this fight of like, our one fighter against as many as you want. If you win, you have control of the Nihil. If not, we do things my way. And then he says at the end, like, you won't be piloting against me, you'll be piloting against my son. So it's Marchion Ro, who's like 10 years old or something like that, in one fighter against the small fleet of Nihil that is here at this time. But it's the first time they're using the path engines to show the power. So Marchion is able to like just use the paths and appear all over the place, teleport around the battlefield, taking all of them out. Now, they quickly like agree to like, oh, whoa, this is insane. We will agree to this. We surrender, basically. But Marchion doesn't give up the fight. Like, he kills like at least say like 5 other ships or something like that, even after his father says to, before he actually eventually stops. So this is where he says he's the Eye of the Nihil. We then cut to the next scene, the kill, which obviously is Marchion assuming control over the Nihil, which we got this in the backstory from the mainline novels, but so they don't focus on it too much, other than to, I suppose, get to this point of like, they ask him, do you have that? Do you have the same like vision as people before you in your family? And he says, I believe I do. And the vision that we cut to is like all the Jedi dead, and it's meant to really highlight just like, this is the way Marchion sees things, sees the world. That he seems to, more than other members of his race, really not trust other people and really have a different view on the world. That's getting into, I suppose, psychopath tendencies. So yeah, this is where we go into issue 2, and we see that he has this captured Jedi here, who he's revealing that like, oh yeah, I took down Starlight Beacon, and he shows this Jedi the fact that, yep, it happened, like here's a holo vid of it crashing, and he just points out that it's not like the how that's important, it's the who. In Marchion's mind, it's the most important thing to get across is that Marchion Ro took down Starlight Beacon, not how exactly he did it. And then we cut to the politicians sort of like debating this of like, how did we not know that Marchion Ro was the one who actually did this? How were we so blind to all of this? And they focus, of course, on the how rather than the who. And there's this sense that like, oh, are they underestimating him in all of this by still just sort of treating him as the leader of a band of pirates, when I suppose what they're trying to get at here is that, I suppose the reason in a way phase 2 is going to be the way it is that we will learn more about Ro by reflecting on the past than we will just trying to figure out what exactly it was that he did. So there's a little bit of some argument here where like obviously we get the idea from one of the last books. The Jedi are going back to the temple. Everyone's been recalled because they don't want everyone out in the field with an unexplained threat like the Leveler out there able to just completely counter Jedi and Force abilities. So they're going back there to reflect on things and learn from the past. And the politicians are like, are the Jedi being cowards? But the argument is just that like, it is stupid to fight something we don't know anything about. So that's kind of interesting. The next one, scene 2, The Hunt, very, very interesting. Again, showing his sort of manipulative side here, where he basically tells the story of his people to some of his most loyal Nihil members. And he tells it in this like amazing way that like, he is obviously the legend from this story. He is telling his history to them, that he wouldn't tell this to anyone else. So he gets them completely on his side, that they would do like anything for him. And then they go on this mission. And the mission is effectively, he wants to get more levelers. Because of course he basically had to sacrifice the one that he had to execute the Starlight Beacon mission. So they head to this planet, but it's revealed that like he knows the situation here, that you effectively have to sacrifice a bunch of people ahead of you to get through. And that's exactly what happens. Like all of his loyal people go in ahead, they get taken out, and while the defenses are focused on them, he just heads in. And so he's on the planet with the few loyal people that have survived. And this is when he activates his sort of... this was established before, that he has this kind of scepter thing with the gem that can kind of call to the levelers. So he calls them in. The art gets very weird here. I guess they're still trying to be really vague and stuff like that about what's going on with them. They don't really kind of cover it too much, but effectively they do after losing a bunch of people again, managed to capture more of them. He does explain that they are called the Nameless, and that, yeah, they, in his mind, they do just counter the Jedi. That's the main focus. They make the Jedi afraid, then weak, then dead. So that's what he's about. So this was just for him to get more of these beings that countered the Jedi. Now, what do you make of like the form that they showed off? I believe at the panel at Celebration, they more clearly showed off the idea of the leveler, I suppose. What like Ro does to them to make them so aggressive is different than their natural form. And this is I think is why we're doing phase 2 in the way we're doing it. Yes, there's some hyperspace prospector stuff to cover, and there's some value to going back to, I suppose, earlier on in this era, and rather than showing the transition from things are really good to things are really bad, to just show things when they were just flat out good. You also, I think the main focus here probably is that you are going to investigate stuff surrounding what happened with Ro's family, to where they discovered this power and what was going on, and so on. There's one interesting line of dialogue here, I think, but my family was connected to an attempt to use them once before, long ago, and despite the Jedi's efforts to exterminate us, we survived, we remembered. So that is the thing that I think they're going for there, of like, I think there's always been a subtle, like, is this family connected to the Sith somehow? Somehow with the whole hyperspace prospecting thing, and I'm assuming they'll do that, and behind the scenes reveal that like the Sith were involved in this, and add more impact to the Sith coming out of hiding in the prequels and so on. So there's that. One of the main survivor guys does ask, like, okay, this is great and all, but why are we going so hard on this? Why are we doing this? Like, what is the aim of this? There's a kind of interesting page right towards the end here where it just goes through, like, he doesn't really give an answer. That's what the next kind of scene is about. But it just goes through his head, like, he considered several courses of action. He thought about lying, he thought about killing, but not for a moment did he contemplate telling the truth. It is possible he didn't even know the true answer to the question this loyal wounded fool had asked. It was not about power, it was not about wealth or revenge. Though all those swirled through Marchion Ro's mind from time to time. The truth was deeper and simpler. If the Eye of the Nihil could find a sufficient level of self-awareness to find that truth and choose to respond honestly, this is what he would say. I'm all that matters, and I do not like people who do not matter telling me what to do. So it just speaks to the idea his loyal follower asked him, why are we doing this? And his first response is to lie, maybe even kill him, and that basically he doesn't care about anyone, he doesn't trust anyone, and he doesn't feel the need to keep them in the loop. So he then gives his speech, and he does go over the sort of like why of this, and this is super interesting because this is where we get the full-on, like, I suppose, preview for phase 3, and what exactly them doing what they did to Starlight did, and how that's going to change things. Because otherwise you would maybe look at the ending of that and feel like, okay, that's a major victory, but the Nihil have been reduced to quite low numbers, and while sure the Leveler is a great counter against Jedi, they are so low in numbers now that things are quite bad for them. So what's the solution to this overall? So he talks about how they ultimately need a place that can effectively be the Nihil homeworld. And so they've worked on technology, and this is where the whole Chansey Yarrow connection comes in with the Gravity's Heart. And so this new technology, the Storm Seed, he says, will set them free. So what they effectively explain here is that he's put these Storm Seeds out at specific points along the main hyperspace routes in and out of the Outer Rim. And when a ship goes through hyperspace near a Storm Seed, it goes off and kind of, I guess, forcibly pulls the ship out of hyperspace, I guess, and creates another great disaster type situation. Again, sort of in a way bringing the High Republic Phase 1 sort of full circle, that the thing that in a way started it off is going to be the thing that ends it. That, yeah, why didn't we focus on that? And the kind of terrorism in a way that you can do targeting hyperspace routes. We get that, but it's sort of like to protect the Outer Rim. That now it feels like the core is separated from the Outer Rim, and that the Nihil are going to effectively be able to take over the Outer Rim at will, and they're planning to use the Outer Rim as their kind of home bases of operation, more or less. I think that's what they go into explaining, isn't it? Every ship traveling through hyperspace within the occlusion zone appears to have been lost. Communications from within the Nihil zone are failing. Yeah, here it is. Any ship which tries to use hyperspace to enter our territory will be, without permission, will be destroyed. Anyone who comes to our home, anyone who tries to take this region back will die. So that's huge, because this suddenly actually finally establishes more heavily why the Nihil actually have power. That the Republic is now in a situation where it was helpless to defend its Starlight Beacon, but now it's also politically in this situation where it's trying to bring Outer Rim worlds in to the Republic, and they're mostly succeeding, but now they can't even get a ship out there because the Nihil have control of the Outer Rim. This is huge because it's such a large-scale plan using technology efficiently that it is kind of ingenious, and it feels like this is a threat that, sure, the Jedi are going to have to really struggle to figure out how to kind of get around this. So very interesting overall. Final scene is just him. Basically he uses the thing to call in a leveler to kill this Jedi here, and he just says that I'm the reason the Jedi are weak. End of phase 1. So definitely gets me excited for phase 3. I am actually excited for phase 2 as well, because I do see some value in going back further in time, but they definitely need to justify why we're taking a break after things are just getting really, really interesting. But pretty good overall. So yeah, overall, this volume is actually quite good. The final arc of the main comic series is solid, if maybe not stunningly amazing. And then Eye of the Storm feels like some of the few must-read comics for the High Republic. So overall, pretty highly recommended. I'd say overall, probably like a 8.5 out of 10. Like I said, I'd probably give the main series like a 7.5 for its final arc, but I'd probably be leaning more towards like a 9 out of 10 for Eye of the Storm. And I think on average, it probably comes out to about like an 8.5. So pretty good overall. So there are my thoughts on the Marvel High Republic comic. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts were, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.